Township of West Lincoln Administration Finance Fire Committee agenda for Monday, October the 21st. Note to member of the public, all cell phones, pagers, PDAs, AT&Ts, ATVs, turn them all off, please. I'm your chair tonight, Mike Rayner. For the members of committee, is there any change in order of the items on the agenda? Seeing none. Disclosure of pecuniary interest and or conflict of interest from any members of committee at this time. Seeing none, thank you. Appointments. Tonight, under item A 60-9, we have Staff Sergeant Rom Diagilio, Detachment 8, and Chief Brian McCulloch, Niagara Region Police. They're going to be discussing community policing presentation tonight. Gentlemen, welcome, and you may come forward to spot for you right there. If you got an extra pen, I normally take a pen with you. You got it? Thank you.
Thanks very much. There we go. Thanks very much. Appreciate the opportunity to come here this evening to represent the Niagara Regional Police Service. My comments are going to be very brief because, quite frankly, I view Rom Diagilio, Staff Sergeant Diagilio, as the Chief of Police for 8th District. I expect that all members of West Lincoln, and if they have concerns, that you don't go to the CAO of Walmart if you have a problem with an item that you buy in Walmart. You go to the local store manager, and that's how I view Rom. He is in tune with all of the issues that are going on in Grimsby. All of the frontline uniform officers that work out of Grimsby are also responsible for West Lincoln and Lincoln, as well as a cadre of detectives that work out of that office. But that's not all that you see. That may be the officers that you see on the road. But there are a number of officers that also are part of our response to keeping West Lincoln and all of the other communities of 8th District safe. So all of our special victims unit, domestic violence, sexual assault, child abuse, fraud unit, homicide unit, and also all of our emergency services units, our tactical unit, explosive disposal, our traffic enforcement. It really is a collective team effort. And so if Rom needs additional support here in West Lincoln and in 8th District in particular, he has that support. It's just a phone call or an email away, and he'll have that. So without any further ado, I'll turn it over to Rom. Thank you.
I think you can hear me otherwise. Okay, thank you. Folks, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. As the chief said, I've been at 8th District now just for over a year, and met most of you. Have a great relationship with the folks from the town. We just had a recent meeting. So what I thought I would do is just kind of give you my perspective of what's been happening specifically to West Lincoln, some of the issues that we're all facing. Hopefully answer some of your questions, and I'm sure, I always say this, in the end, I know that really the headliner, it will be the questions to the chief, it always is, but hopefully I can answer some of your questions. So the first thing I want to talk about is, we had a meeting with Bev and her staff, very important issue, which is legalization of cannabis. So I want to talk about that so that I can give some information. You're going to be constantly asked these questions. So we had a great training session. So what happened is the Cannabis Enforcement Act, Detective Wiesner and Detective Ryan attended 8th District with some of the town and just had a great information session. And I asked the detectives to do the following. I said, folks, I want you to break down what the issue is in layman's terms so that we can explain it to the residents. So I'm going to hopefully do as good a job as Ricky did at that meeting when I talked to you. So folks, here's what happened. So Health Canada, okay, is the governing body that regulates licenses. Two streams, okay, commercial and personal. Let's do commercial first because that's not going to cause us any issues. Commercial is highly regulated, okay? Health Canada is on top of those folks constantly, okay? It's the other stream that we're seeing here in West Lincoln, okay? I know that your residents have come talk to you about it, so let's talk about that stream. Here's what happens. So I have an issue, a medical issue. That's fine. My doctor says, Rome, for your condition, I need a certain amount of grams of cannabis for my condition. Therefore, that license will allow me to grow, and it'll be very specific, so many plants, indoor, outdoor, etc. So folks, there's where the issue is. So now you have a person with a license, and your folks were great on this. It's great learning for me as well. Because I said, on that license, you're supposed to get permission from the township. And Bev laughed and said, we've gotten zero requests, meaning every single license in West Lincoln does not abide by either zoning, the Fire Standards Act, Building Act, etc., because one of the conditions of the license says they have to get permission. All right, so here's the loop, folks. This is where it gets very complicated. So on the enforcement end, on our end, it is extremely difficult, as the detectives explained, to investigate this because they have a legal license. So it's extremely difficult to get on the property, to investigate, to lay a charge, and most importantly, something that I also learned is, folks, we have people that are currently under charge that still have a valid license, and the detective let me know that basically that's true because until a conviction is registered under the Cannabis Enforcement Act, meaning they'll take a charge and anything else other than that, the license will hold. So on our end, folks, and great job by the bylaw officer, Tiana has done a great job, and they're working together. But I just thought I'd tell you what's happening. So basically, your plan of attack is really zoning bylaw, okay, building standards, and fire safety. And that's really your first prong. Now, that being said, our detectives will work with you, and that was the entire point of that meeting. Meaning when issues come up, and it's already happening, she already gave us a great outline of what's happening in West Lincoln. So the detectives will work together and try to work on very specific cases. And again, I'm kind of stressing the workload it takes to get a conviction. I'm sure the chief will say it's an enormous amount of work to get one conviction. So I just wanted to give you the overview of what's happening. So the answer is, what can you do about it? Well, Health Canada, maybe after this election, it all depends, folks, because a Liberal government brought this together, so I can't say what's going to happen, and neither could the detectives. What they are doing is lobbying Health Canada to try to get more inspectors to check the licenses. So that's already occurring, and that's the next prong of what's going to happen with legalization of cannabis. Okay.
Just add a point to that. If I can just add a point. This, the situation that you're experiencing here in West Lincoln is really no different than other communities are experiencing across Ontario. It is organized crime will take the path of least resistance, and right now it's the medicinal marijuana path is the path that is the most lucrative for them, and as a result, what you're experiencing here, like I said, is happening elsewhere. I think what this council may want to consider is you may want to write a letter to Health Canada, and you may want to have a representative from Health Canada come and speak and answer questions that you may have, because they are the regulators for this industry, and I think they owe this council and other councils answers to questions that your constituents have, for sure.
Thank you. Folks, one of the biggest calls that we have for service in West Lincoln revolves around road safety. So I just want to talk about what's happened in 2018 and what's happening to date in 2019. So one of the biggest factors that we look at is fatalities and life-threatening collisions. So basically, if the collision reconstruction unit is called out for fatality, or if that motor vehicle collision at the time is deemed that the person may lose their life, they're called out. So good news on that front is that it's been stable, meaning in 2018, we had 2 fatalities and 1 call for serious life-threatening, and to date, we've only had 1 fatality and 1 call for serious life-threatening, which is obviously a good sign. Along that mode, one of the most common questions I get is how to report a traffic complaint. So I want folks to be as efficient as possible, and there is a very efficient and easy way of doing it. And I want to guide, if you can tell your constituents this, by all means, and it's this. If you go to our webpage, www.Niagara Regional Police, just click on that. At the very top, it'll say, I'd like to. When you click on that, it says report a traffic complaint. And folks, whatever mode they want, here are the examples. Some folks would rather have a voice message, so there's a hotline, and a traffic clerk will check those every business day. Monday to Friday, those are checked. If they want to submit an email with their concern, they can do that. There's also an electronic form, and I just did one, like a pretend one, and it took me about 5 minutes total from going there and just outlining exactly what my concern is. And the reason I'm suggesting that, folks, is those are tracked, they're assigned to the traffic enforcement unit and to us, and it's the most efficient way for your constituents, if they have a concern, to do it that way. By all means, they can come down and see me and we'll discuss their issue. I have no issue with that whatsoever. I'm just giving you the most efficient way that people are busy, they see something that they want to address. This is a very easy, effective way of doing that. So by all means, if you can, please suggest an electronic form. It works great. And then what happens, folks, is it also shows up on what's called e-parade, which is every morning, the constables in 8th District watch something that has different issues of what's going on. So that traffic complaint will show up. We discuss it at briefing, and then an officer is assigned. Also on road safety, folks, this also comes up. So I just thought I'd mention some of the resources that we use that you may or may not be aware of. So road safety here in West Lincoln is extremely important to your constituents, so you may or may not be aware of the following. Quite routinely, you're going to have, I'm sure, folks, we have plate readers in Niagara Regional Police. Are you aware of what that technology is? So the Traffic Enforcement Unit, we're very fortunate a couple of years ago to secure 2 plate readers. So what are those? Well, it's 2 unmarked cruisers that can go down the road, and as plates come up into, it uses optics, it runs the plates, and it's looking for suspended, prohibited, wants, obviously no insurance, and val tags. It is an unbelievable piece of technology, okay? And I just wanted you aware that those plate readers are routinely deployed in this area because of the high incidence in the past of collisions. So I just wanted you aware of that. On top of that, there's also many times where unmarked traffic cars are also in this area. So sometimes they're not most easy to pick out, although the counselor said that because of the hubcaps, perhaps he can pick them out. But unmarked cars routinely are in the area to supplement 8th District officers to do speed enforcement, distraction, etc. On top of that, whether you see them or not, ride and or drug recognition, a question always comes up with the new legalization of cannabis. So we're quite fortunate that we have many officers in the traffic unit that are drug recognition officers. They spend a lot of time in this area. We also have something called SFSTs, which is an officer on the road, and there are many in 8th District, who can also, a little less training, but has the knowledge to say, well, you know what, I think you're impaired by whatever, and then call the drug recognition officer over to confirm their belief. So I just wanted you aware that routinely all these resources are being deployed in West Lincoln. And the reason being is, I know you know this, is the 3 main reasons of collisions in West Lincoln are speed, distraction. I used to say alcohol, it's actually impairment, okay? So it's alcohol and drugs, okay? Speed is number 1, folks, okay? So it's speed, distraction is creeping up, okay? And the impaired is number 3, okay? So that's why we spend so much resources on this issue, is because we know it's in this area and we want to combat it. Along those notes, folks, and we just talked about this with the counselor. So last year we started a Twitter account. Now, I think our communication officer a couple of years ago kind of, as you can tell, I'm an old dog. It was something I had to learn at the traffic unit a few years ago. And hopefully most of you, and I know the town retweets, I'm very, thank you for doing that. So folks, I want to make sure that you're aware of how important that Twitter account is. So it's at 8 NRPS is our Twitter account. So we use that Twitter account to do many things. Okay, we educate people. We'd say whether the chief's going somewhere. It also is about initiatives and things that are going on in the community. So by all means, if you can use it with your constituents, I'd really appreciate it. It has a great multiplier effect. For example, just as one example, crossing guard issue at the beginning of the year always happens. What do? We have pictures there, okay, with the crossing guard, with officers, et cetera, and then the region, the town, and everyone else kind of tweets along. It shows people what we're doing, okay, and it's a multiplier. So by all means, folks, please follow us. I really appreciate it. And use it, meaning if you have a concern and I've addressed it, please direct your constituents. It's a great tool to say, look, you had that issue on Regional Road 20. There they are. They're actually doing speed enforcement, okay? So counselors are getting that, okay? It's a great multiplier, so please use it. I really would appreciate it. I asked the crime analyst, so let me talk about what the crime analyst is first off. We are quite fortunate that we have Brent Cowan. So a crime analyst, what is that? So a crime analyst is a very highly trained civilian. And we used to have someone called Nancy Speck, and the chief and I will say that she was literally the Google of bad people, meaning she knew, she had 30-something years of experience, and what she used to do and what Brent does is they look for trends and connections, okay, in how crimes are done, who's doing them, and then they're used by various units in the Niagara Regional Police. For us, it's Uniform Officer 8th District, but all the units. And so he was nice enough just to give me some very general stats, but I just want you to aware that that does exist. Every week, a crime report comes out to the officers specific to 8th District, but obviously also specific to West Lincoln, specifying whatever trends Brent sees, okay? So he did a quick look for me, and I just want you aware of the following. So in 2018, West Lincoln specifically had 1,300 calls for service, okay? This year, you're trending along the same way. So I expect to be right around 1,300 calls for you. So no shocker, your number one calls for service, and accounts for 33%, are road safety calls, which are driving complaints, impaireds, and motor vehicle collisions. So those three, year after year, folks, it goes way beyond 2018, but year after year, those road safety calls are the majority of your calls. So some good news is this. So driving complaints for this year, I hate saying them, I always say cautiously, are down. Okay, that's good news. That's really good news, okay? We looked at some other indicators. For example, some property crimes, robberies, B&E, stable, okay? Now, what has increased? No shocker. Drug-related calls. Okay, so, and what is that from? They're from the cannabis grows, okay? So people are smelling and or seeing things that they don't like, and there's been a drastic increase in drug-related calls, and that's totally expected with the cannabis, okay? On top of that, a drastic increase has been in calls with mental health, meaning a person in crisis. Now, this mirrors exactly what's happening throughout the region, the country, everywhere, okay? So basically, we're mirroring what's already happening everywhere else. So those calls for 2018 and into 2019 has a marked increase. Prevention. So when we talk about prevention, I just want to talk about what that really means. So folks, what that really means is if we see an issue, and I'll make it as simple as possible, it happens all the time. Counselor called for a speeding car. Sometimes that's as simple as assigning an officer, it's called a directed patrol, to take that on and to deal with that. We've had many initiatives, for example, along 20, it was called Corridor, where we had complaints of high speed. That's done through different initiatives that the officers take on themselves, or through a generation of you've identified a problem and they address the problem. One of the things that officers have tried to do, and I'm a big supporter of this, and so is the chief, is walking the beat. Walking the beat, I use my dad as the gauge. What does my dad want? What's a person want from the police? They want to see the police officer. They want to talk to the police officer. All right. So walking the beat is one of the best ways of doing it, and I know you folks know that. It's very difficult to do because of call pressure. It's super important, and we're doing it, okay? But there's that balancing act between walking the beat, okay, which is absolutely most important with the community. If you talk to them, they'll say, I want to see a police officer. And what they really mean is, it would be great if they're walking and talking to us. And we understand that, and we're doing that. But there's that balance between walking the beat and the crunch of calls for service. But I want you aware that we are doing that. And lastly, folks, I think the chief touched upon this, but this is another common question that I get from residents, and I'm sure you folks do. So when we say Niagara Regional Police for here in West Lincoln, I almost guarantee you will say a specific uniform officer. I can almost guarantee it. It could be Constable Doyle. Okay, you're going to say that's the face of what you see for the Niagara Regional Police is a marked cruiser with an officer. Okay, and the chief just brought something up, and I like to tell people sometimes. So I did a check of what other units attended specifically West Lincoln. So I can't get into specifics, but I'll give you some of them. So the Forensic Services Unit, which most people would say CSI, okay, has attended numerous times on numerous calls, okay? So the Intelligence Unit, which encompasses many different units, but for you folks, that is also the Cannabis Enforcement Unit, okay, is always within West Lincoln. The Computer Cybercrime Unit, I just want to mention this because when something very, when I say cool and new in policing, this is something that deals with, you know, applications, what people are doing on applications, what's happening on social media, and relating it to an investigation. So Detective Mander is one of those officers, and we've utilized him on various investigations within specifically West Lincoln. Another group, when I say this, since I spent so much time at this building, Cushman, are ETU, EDU, TSG, K9, all these initials, and I'll tell you, it's the TAC team, okay? It's the Explosive Disposal Unit, it is the Tactical Support Group, and obviously K9 officers. So we've had this unit deployed, and if I were to do a number, that is well over 20-something members, okay, deployed to something for an incident, and I know that's occurred. So here's some of the other units that have attended. Domestic violence investigators, again, when an incident hits certain benchmarks and it's defined as a domestic assault, these investigators must be called and to investigate. Fraud investigators have attended several times. Traffic Enforcement and Collision Reconstruction Unit, as I mentioned, probably the unit that's probably the Traffic Enforcement Unit by far the most resources that have been spent within West Lincoln. And also Technological Crime and Special Victims Unit. Special Victims Unit are investigators specially trained in sexual assault and child abuse. So folks, I just wanted to give you just a basic overview of some of the things that are happening in West Lincoln. I know that's a lot to digest, and by all means, any questions?
Thank you very much for your presentation. Both of you. Members of the committee, there's lots of hands up. Mr. Mayor, you may go first.
So, I get to lead off here, and I want to thank you for coming. I can't stress how important it is that we have this community engagement, that we have the opportunity to meet you, and I might say this, every time that we've asked of you to set up a meeting or to discuss a particular item, whether it's with staff or come to our, touch a truck or whatever, just kind of have some kind of presence for the purpose of engaging the public, you've come. And I really appreciate that. I know our citizens do. And so, and here you are again, just giving us an update. And I think it's important to say that at the outset, that as far as I'm concerned, we have a really good relationship with you and I hope you, as you said in the beginning of your presentation, you have a good mirror for our engagement from our staff. So thank you very much for that. Just a couple quick questions. So I had one about thefts, but you answered that. Things seem to be stable. We seem to be 2019 similar to 2018. I was a little bit concerned that, you know, what strikes fear into rural residents, you know, down long driveways and stuff like that, are home break-ins, you know, and trends. You know, they're going down a particular road, Second Concession or 16 Road. You know, people just are, you know, just go beside themselves, right? And so I'm glad things are stable. I guess I had a little question about grow ops and stuff. Sometimes we get the wool pulled over our eyes here in council, and people say we had an application come through, and there was like, it was for 4 personal licenses, but there was something like 5,000 plants, and they were producing 20 grams per day. And I think we managed to figure out that 5 grams per day was quite a lot of dope for one person, and the amount of plants that you need to produce 5 grams is not that much. So you would confirm that 5 grams is a lot. You know, if somebody comes with a license that says, personally, I can smoke 20 grams, we can say that you need to go back. Is that pretty much the standard fare for an application that we would see?
So the detective was very specific, and he's seen it all over the place.
Well, and that's just it.
On the licenses, he's seen it all over the place, and all we can say is, you know, that this is the part where law enforcement's on the outside looking in.
Yeah.
So basically, this is a discussion between the person, their doctor,
Okay.
and then the doctor saying you need a certain amount. We're on the outside of that.
Yeah, okay. And the other thing is, I think, and you echoed this, but I like to restate it, that the tracking data, that's really ultimately what drives the engagement of police services in our municipality. What I would like to highlight is that if I'm sitting at a particular function and somebody, you know, wants to strike up a conversation with me and we get onto speeders in the countryside, that's a little too nebulous, a little bit too anecdotal to be helpful. The tracking data needs to be very specific, and so I'm glad you highlighted that particular button on the top of the website that allows a person to enter in specifics, because ultimately that's what drives anecdotal conversation. We do the same thing here municipally. If we have a quote-unquote rat infestation, we want to see bodies, rat bodies. We want to see rat nests. We want to, you know, and we can't go, well, I saw one, and you know, perhaps that's helpful, but more than likely, you know, just to see one rat might be a squirrel, and so, you know, just seeing that the simplicity of entering tracking data, appreciate that. I think that's our driving point, and that's what Twitter does as well. It keeps things current, keeps things accountable, keeps things in a format that allows us to enter it, but also you to track it. So appreciate that. Yeah.
If I could just echo those comments and speak to the importance of members of the public reporting incidents which they think may be insignificant in themselves, in that, you know, their car, they left it open overnight, and they had $5 in change in the car, and they went out in the morning, car's been ransacked, and the $5 is gone. That in itself, to them, may not be that big a deal, but to report it online, and then we find out that it wasn't just them, it was the 6 neighbors to their left and the 6 neighbors to their right, and we now know that, you know, we have somebody out there who's specifically targeting a particular neighborhood, and then ROM can deploy resources to address that particular issue that's going on as an example of that type of reporting. Yeah.
Yes, William.
Thank you. First of all, I'll echo the mayor as well. Thank you so much for coming out and giving us that presentation. I know originally when I thought to kind of put a motion together to bring you guys out, I wasn't too sure how long it would take, and I was actually surprised to see how quickly you guys were able to get out here, so we appreciate you making that accommodation. I guess the question I have a few questions, but when I just want a little bit more clarity. So when you talked about the calls kind of being stabilized around 1,300 or give or take, I'm also trying to understand if there actually is a trend going down, or one, if people are just losing interest in calling, or two, if that percentage at 33% is actually being offset by the online usage. So if people are actually complaining more online, even though you're still getting X amount of calls, is that number actually greater? And as you can imagine, like I hear on, you know, at least on a weekly, if not, you know, every few days, people complaining about issues we have in our area, all primarily driven for speeding, and you know, with maybe 1 or 2 complaints I've heard, you know, for distracted driving. But that being the case, I was just trying to figure out as a municipality, like what we could even do, or if you had any suggestions for some more traffic calming measures that you might see that have been useful or utilized in other communities as well. Oh, your mic's off, I think.
Okay, so I'm sure we talked about this, but you know, part of my career was being a collision reconstructionist for about 7 years. So as far as traffic calming, I've seen various things. One of the most effective things that I've seen is a speed sign, okay? It's very cost effective, and I see it utilized throughout the region, and it is highly effective, okay? Again, in the short term, meaning you have a problem in this little area, you deploy the speed sign. It's very cost effective because 1 week later, you can move it to the next issue, the next issue, the next issue. And what I can tell you is, I haven't priced it out, but some of my colleagues at the region would probably echo that it's reusable, cost effective, and it's mobile. So again, I hate saying engineering answers on my end because I'm not supposed to be doing that, but what I have seen that's one example of a very cost effective way for townships to address some of the concerns of the residents.
Oh, that's excellent. Thank you for sharing that. I think that the other question I think some people might be interested in, like, so when you talk about Twitter, some of us have Twitter, including myself, but I don't believe Twitter is the number one common tool used specifically in West Lincoln. I find a lot more my outreach with social media. It happens to be through Facebook. So I was kind of curious what the response time, if there's any, through the Facebook channels that you guys might have that people could do that or go with that course of action, or is it just more, I guess, easier for you guys just to stick with what you currently have, which is Twitter? Because from what I understand, and I guess I haven't done a lot of research, but trying to understand the response time with Facebook. I understand the ultimate goal is send them to the website and go to the complaint section, and then they follow that, but everyone is a little bit more reluctant, and they just rather be able to do one click versus 2 or 3, so.
So our corporate communications unit uses both, three main social media feeds, so Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. So if Rom puts something on Twitter, our corporate communications unit will pick it up and they'll put it onto the other 2 platforms. I primarily use Twitter myself, and I know that it's routinely picked up and you put out onto those other 2 platforms.
And I guess my last question here is thinking long term, and this is very long term, but like at what point would there be, how do I phrase it? I guess, do you think any time in the next 10 to 25 years we would actually see maybe a detachment of our own of some capacity, considering West Lincoln's enormous? You know, we're about just under 400 square kilometers big. I just wonder if there's any plans or any way that you guys can foresee how we're going to increase our police presence, because as our community grows, this is going to be it's only going to escalate. We're working on infrastructure, trying to improve our roadways, but in the meantime, as we bring in the traffic and the people got to get to work in Toronto and vice versa, like it becomes a highway even though we're just on street roads.
So through Mr. Chair, our approach to deployment of our frontline resources is really evidence informed, and at this point in time, we just completed a frontline workload study, and there are no plans in place at the present time to initiate a standalone detachment here in West Lincoln. There certainly is a lot of development that's going on in this area, in Smithville in particular, but that's, we will continue to look at estimates that are provided to us by the region in terms of population growth, expected population growth, and make informed decisions based on that. So we have the ability through the software tool that we've developed to continually monitor and assess the calls for service that are being experienced here in West Lincoln, to measure our response time to priority 1 calls in this area, which is a rural area, and our response time measurement tool is 10 minutes, and we're currently achieving that goal. So I think when we start to see that goal is no longer being achieved, that's a telltale sign for us that perhaps the resources that we have are not sufficient in achieving that goal.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you so much. That's everything, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Gannon.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, to probably the chief. Just looking at the cannabis issue and the fact that you're talking about some of the problems, one of the issues that the mayor was alluding to was, he was talking about the number of grams that some doctors are prescribing. And the situation that we had here was actually the same doctor, 4 separate people with licenses, and it was 50 grams per day, each of them the same. So I guess my question is, in terms of higher thinking and helping to fight back against what's going on, I'm wondering if there's any law, organization of any sort, tracking what's happening with the doctors as well, because obviously there's an issue in terms of what those numbers are being placed on prescriptions. So somebody may very legitimately go to their doctor, but we also have some doctors who are not so legitimately writing prescriptions for multiple patients at very high numbers. So I guess I want to know that somebody's on track of that and keeping tabs.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think the reality is that that is the responsibility of Health Canada as the regulator. I would think that whether it's the Canadian Medical Association or the Ontario Medical Association, there is an avenue to file complaints to their board to investigate whether there are particular concerns about a doctor that's overprescribing. Again, there are a number of doctors who are cannabis enforcement team have seen time after time after time are prescribing large doses of marijuana or cannabis, and ultimately allowing these individuals to grow significant number of plants. And again, if they're not able to grow it themselves, they then subcontract that out to a grower, and that's what we're seeing here in West Lincoln and elsewhere in the province.
Thank you. The doctor in question, of course, was not a local doctor, and when we started to look into that, it was a doctor who doesn't know West Lincoln, and it was people who didn't live in West Lincoln, and it was just a nice place to dump on a small community. So at least it's good to know that somebody is starting to keep an eye on that. That might be another question that we can ask if we do follow through on the suggestion to send a letter to Health Canada. We actually include that as part of our concerns. So thank you.
I know we have a very anxious Councilor Trombetta. You have some questions?
Thank you, Councilor Rayner. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming out, the Staff Sergeant and Chief. Living in the most rural area of West Lincoln, that's where we get a lot of phone calls, a lot of, thefts, a lot of speeding, and especially these illegal marijuana, 2x4s and poly from Home Depot, and, they're putting 30, 40 plants out there. And we're getting a lot of calls, and especially about that case and the speeding as well. Is there any data we can use from you guys to say, hey, listen, you guys are out here. You guys are enforcing. I know, you're saying that you guys are giving us presents and so on and so forth, but where can we tell a constituent saying, listen, they've given this many tickets in West Lincoln, these files, instead of, like, how do I go as a councilman saying, okay, yeah, we're going to forward your calls on to, the NRP, but, they're coming back to us saying, well, really, you're not doing anything for us because nothing's happened. But where can we show some data to say to our constituent, listen, they have given tickets. They have looked at this. They have searched the, break-ins or barn fires that we've gotten all over the place. What do I do as a councillor to give those answers to my constituents? That's what we're looking for.
Okay.
It's okay.
So that's a complicated question. It really is, and it's one of the most difficult things in police work to do. And I'm going to give you the example. Meaning, everything that we do is recorded somewhere. Okay, so whether it's in a report, okay, it's tracked where we are. If we write up tickets or ponds, that's tracked as well. Now, the difficult part, and I totally get it, and I wish I had the answer for you, is your question is, all right, so now how do we show that? Well, I'm going to go back to the very beginning again. It's very difficult to do, I'll give you one example, prevention. So I send an officer, you call me, and you have, to a certain spot, and you go, I have concerns about this speeding. The officer sits there, and this happens routinely in, I'll give you one example, school zones. If I was going to say the number one thing is going to be school zones. So I will have officers a massive amount of time, massive, and that's fine. Very vulnerable people are in school zones. But what I can tell you, and that's good, is they are preventing because they see the car from happening. So that is a very, very difficult thing to capture. So I don't have a great answer for you. I wish I did.
And I wish there was something out there that the NRP can do, because, you know, if there's a DUI, you see a list of names come up, you know, in the paper, say this person, this person, this person. But there's no data that I can go back to tell a constituent, wait a second, they're on concession, whatever, 3, and they've written, you know, tickets in this area, between this area, so many tickets. So there's no data that the NRP, I know you guys record it, but there's
There
nothing
is.
issued to the public, is what I'm trying to say. That we can use as, because I bet you all of us can name 2-3 streets that we're getting constant speeding on. We can name 2-3 areas that are constant break-ins, and more areas that have illegal marijuana, and we can't go back to the constituents and give them an answer and saying that we hear you, we're helping you, but we have no data to go back saying we've done something for you.
And as Rome alluded, it's a difficult thing to quantify, because we can spend hours at a particular location and come up with 0 traffic tickets. But at the end of the day, there wasn't anybody that was speeding, so the officers have done their job, and at that particular point in time.
So I just thought maybe there was something in there that, you know, West Lincoln, Grimsby, Lincoln, they all have some specific data of how many tickets are issued for West Lincoln or Grimsby, or anything that we can at least refer to online somehow to give an answer, but there's nothing out there like that.
I think our annual report, I'd have to check, but I think our annual report breaks down the number of traffic tickets that we have issued, and the number of impaired drivers per district, and I think perhaps by municipality as well. But I can check on that for you.
Perfect. Thank you. Sorry for that question. It's just, it
No,
helps me
no.
to answer the questions when we're getting all those texts or phone calls from our constituents, right? So,
I just want to say one thing about that. So the only thing I'll say to that, which does work really well, is, you know, our Twitter account, whether it was through traffic enforcement, through that unit, if you watch NRPS Road Safety, okay, which is the traffic unit, or you watch us, by far, folks, what people want to see is a visual. So if you're asking what people want, and I can tell you this, they want a photo of you. I'll give you an example. My dad wants you at a stop sign. I take a picture of the officer at that stop sign. My dad sees that. Trust me, you've done your job. So I always use that. My dad is the barometer of, you know, very high expectations. So back to you folks. If you give us some of these, and we look at them anyways, but that tool is, when I say one of the best, it's in real time. It shows the officer doing it. It's one of the best tools. I totally understand about the stats. Stats, you know, that was one of the courses I took. I got a finance background. I totally understand that. The non-existence of something is extremely difficult to show and prove, okay, which really means prevention. So if I'm there in a marked car preventing you from breaking into that house, I'm good with that. As opposed to a stat saying I had a break and enter here that I solved. I'll take prevention all day long. So I hope I've helped a little bit.
a little bit, yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
all right, thanks.
Great. Thank you for your
Takes a
presentation,
lot to get
gentlemen.
them a lot. A little bit is good, actually.
Okay.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Any others? I have a number, if you don't mind. Number 1, you mentioned contact Health Canada and have them come here to make a presentation. For what I've gathered so far, we can't even get a response trying to call if there's a problem with an odor complaint or something. We have a number of people that have said, we've tried, they won't return our call, they won't answer the phone. How can we go from that to actually getting a hold of somebody? And then on top of that, since they're absolutely unwilling to want to discuss it because there's a gazillion complaints because they're not handling it right, do you honestly, have you got examples of other municipalities where a representative from Health Canada has actually come?
I don't. In answer to your question, no, I don't know if that's happened in other jurisdictions, but I think they have an onus to respond to you, and whether that's, there must be a complaint mechanism, whether it's through the ombudsman or some mechanism through the federal government, that if you're not getting satisfaction, we have complaint avenues through police. If you're not satisfied with the response from police, I would suspect that there would be the same level of complaint mechanism that is available if you're not getting satisfaction through Health Canada.
I'm not sure if there is a complaint mechanism. All I've heard is from numerous people and from numerous other organizations that they've tried to contact Health Canada with regards to odor complaints and everything, and they have got absolutely nowhere. It's like they're ignoring the issue, like there's nobody home, like don't worry about it. We weren't supposed to get a call because there wasn't supposed to be a smell. I mean, we've got absolutely nowhere with them. They've been totally useless, and they've blindsided us. And so when you said get a representative, I thought, well, we can't even get the phone to answer, and we're going to go from there. I don't know if our CIO, have we made an attempt as a township to try to contact anybody from Health Canada with regards to concerns we've had in this township?
Yes, Councillor, we have made calls. The one thing we did find is, though, in speaking with the ROM, or Staff Sergeant Ram Digilio, was that they've actually hired more staff now, and they have more presence in the province. But it's I would say it's an incremental amount, from 2 to 4, or something that minor. So, but I don't see that there's any harm in trying to write probably to the new minister when the new minister gets put into the role.
I mean, the reality is this, that if it didn't smell like dead skunk, there would not be an issue. You know, if it smelled like rose petals, nobody would be calling up and complaining. But that's the unfortunate reality.
Correct. If I could go to the staff sergeant now, you had mentioned there were some conditions with regards to people allowing to grow in the township of West Lincoln, and one of the conditions was permission from the township. And our CAO has acknowledged that there has never been a request for permission. So is that not in itself then a grounds that they cannot do it? If part of the rules and conditions are you must do these or you can't, so if you do not do any one of the following, therefore you are not qualified. I'm confused with this. If the township says hasn't got a request, then do we not then have the right to say, well, I'm sorry, you didn't come to us, we're going to take it out?
So, sir, as explained to me, basically, the infraction will be a bylaw infraction. So here's the problem. Health Canada has issued a valid license to these folks. Here is your legal license. That's an issue for law enforcement. So now part of that license is, and I agree with you, they did not abide by the conditions, but those charges are either zoning, building standards, fire safety for now. So the other charges have to do with more with, again, through investigative, all these other things, which again is extremely difficult to do.
So you would suggest then the township does have the right to a fire inspection of these facilities to see if they meet the qualifications of a safe building? So the township could use that as a premise to go into these properties?
So I can't give you advice on what the chief or what your bylaw officer is going to abide by on their entrance. That's up to the chief on whatever conditions are that you follow to do building standards, et cetera, and zoning. I'm not suggesting that at all. I'm saying the infraction, if found, okay, would be a bylaw infraction.
Okay, if I can refer then to the chief, is there anything in our regulations, chief, that you as representative of the township of West Lincoln can arbitrarily go and inspect a building because it's part of your process? I believe Hamilton used to do this. You used to have an inspection where they just knock on your door and they can go through your house and check it. It was a number of years ago, but I don't know, is that something that still can be done, or was it done in the past?
Through the chair. Under the FPPA, it has to be immediate threat to life. In order for me to enter a premises, it has to be under immediate threat to life, whether that's a bench warrant. But if it's not an immediate threat to life, I have a hard time entering property. It's like going to a house and checking your smoke detector and your carbon monoxide. They don't have to let me in. I don't have the authority to go in. It has to be under immediate threat to life.
Okay. The next question, if I may ask, if you don't mind, with regards to size of the grow-ups, there are some grow-ups here that have actually taken over chicken farm operations. Now, we know that's impossible for personal use, and if they don't have a grower or a producer's license, is that not grounds? Like, I remember looking at the TV a year or two ago, and they show pictures of the police vans backing up to these greenhouses, unloading all this marijuana. I haven't seen any pictures of that in the last little while.
So through you, Mr. Chair, my understanding is how they are getting around that is how they are severing off the address. So it's 124A Mud Street, 124B Mud Street, 124C Mud Street. Meanwhile, there never has existed 124A, B, C, D, but for each individual residence, as they're referred to, they're getting the license up to 4 that they can grow for each individual address.
Do you have examples, sir, where you're actually checking and you're finding that in a large co-op operation?
Yes.
Yes? Through Chief. Yes.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the example I can give you is Okemi's.
Yes. Can't say.
Enough said, sorry.
We have others besides that. But, okay, you mentioned, I have one last question, I think we finish with this part. This is a very frustrating part, this grow up in West Lincoln, because it's huge. And you smell it long before you see it. You mentioned the length of time. Years ago, when I was called an alderman, I believe there were 1 cruiser in West Lincoln, and a number of years ago, I believe they moved it up to 2, because of the fact you have such a massive jurisdiction from Victoria Avenue all the way to Westbrook. Normally, when you call, and I've done it, it takes up to 45 minutes to get an officer because they're at Victoria Avenue at the time, or they're somewhere else at the time. You mentioned 10 minutes, Chief. Is that on average throughout West Lincoln? You can't go from one end of West Lincoln to another in less than 20 minutes. Like, I'm not quite sure on that one.
So with regards to the, it's called the Managing Patrol Performance Workload Study that we did, that's for priority 1 calls, so that's the highest priority of calls is a response time of 10 minutes. So anything that's a priority 2 or a priority 3 is not part of that. Yeah.
Takes longer. Okay. Any further questions? Councillor Trombetta, you got your hand 3/4 of the way up?
I'm good, even though you'd like probably see me get hauled out of here by then. I'm okay, thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, gentlemen, for your presentation. Appreciate it very much. Members of committee, is there any opportunity? Can we invite the NRP back? We used to in the past have meetings every quarter. Would you gentlemen like to come back in the future? I think these meetings are important, and there's lots of stuff that we would like to discuss related to what happens around our township, which we haven't got into tonight because it was an intro meeting, but it would be something that would be nice in the future if it's possible. Maybe we can arrange to the CAO that.
Mr. Chair, I kind of wonder if maybe we figure out at a later date a time when to make that happen, especially considering the federal election and what may or may not change. So I love that idea personally, but I don't know if I don't know what your thoughts are, what the committee's thoughts are, but maybe we should wait a minute.
If it's acceptable committee, we could leave it to the CAO maybe, if you don't mind, to have further discussions with our guests down the road and hopefully have an
Happy to
opportunity.
work with them, know exactly how to get in touch with them.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Chair, I agree with your statement, but I think once a year would be good to have them come in, and if they were up to it, not every week, once a year would be good if you guys, make some time in your schedule. I think that would be good if we can maybe arrange that through the CAO and the mayor, and we can get you guys in once a year. It'd be great. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you for your presentation. Appreciate it. Okay, we have a packed gallery tonight, so I need to know if the request to address any items on the agenda. Are there any members of the public present who wish to address any items on the Administration, Finance, Fire Committee agenda tonight? Mr. Ganand, have you got anything? Nothing? No? Thank you. All right, we'll move on to consent agenda items. All items listed below are considered to be routine and non-controversial and can be approved by one resolution. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member requests it, in which case the items will be removed from the consent resolution and considered immediately following the adoption of the remaining consent agenda items. Item A, 61-19, Consent agenda items. Number 1, West Lincoln Age Friendly Advisory Committee, WLAFAC, meetings of September 13th, 2019. 2, Joint Accessibility Advisory Committee, minutes of September the 12th, 2019. Information report, WLFD-15-19, monthly update, September 2019. I need a mover and a second to this, please. Councillor Junker and Councillor Riley. Now, items 1, 2, and 3 are hereby received for information with the exception of any items. Is there any items on this that a member of
Mr. Chair,
Councillor Riley, yes?
I'd like to pull number 3.
Poll number 3. Any other ones? Seeing none at this time, with regards to items number 1 and 2, we already have a mover and a seconder. All those in favor of those? That is carried. Item number 3, we need a mover and a seconder for that, or we're fine? We're good with that? Okay, Council. We need a mover and a second for Councillor Riley. You want to move it? The seconder, Councillor Ganaan. Councillor Riley, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much. I just thought this was worth noting, because as I was going through reading this really, I guess hit a soft spot with me. So I think it's worth acknowledging that 4 of the firefighters managed to go to a surprise birthday party, or a surprise, I guess, someone who'd been battling cancer, who one of her last requests was to have the firefighters of West Lincoln attend. So I thought that was quite incredible that they were able to make the time to do that, and thank them, just because I think it shows a lot of character and class, and embodies what our community is all about when we can kind of support each other, especially in our last few days of need. So I think, I don't know, I can't say enough great things about you and your staff there. So I think that's incredible. So I don't know if the chief would like to comment.
Chief?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Just 2 members of council, yeah, it was kind of a very unusual request when we first got it. Putting it out to the guys, there was 4 guys that were interested in going. If you caught the newspaper, there was a little article and a picture in News Now that Mike put in for us at request of actually the family had requested. So, yeah, it was really nice, really good way for the guys to go down there. It was a West Lincoln resident, and she's been battling for quite a long time now. So, yeah, it was really good, really good. Kudos to the guys that went.
Yeah, very good. All right, thank you. Any further on this, Councillor Riley? Seeing none, all those in favor of number 3? And that is now carried. Thank you. Communications, item A 62-19. Mr. Brian Walker, President, Peninsula West Power, Inc. Renomination of second representative on the Board of Directors of Niagara Peninsula Energy, Inc. Recommendation 1, that the email received from Mr. Brian Walker, President, Peninsula West Power, Inc., dated September the 11th, 2019, advising that effective January 1st, 2020, the Township of West Lincoln will have a second representative for a 3-year term on the Board of Directors of Niagara Peninsula Energy, Inc. be received. And 2, that the clerk be hereby authorized to advise Brian Walker, President, Peninsula West Power, Inc., that the Township of West Lincoln nominates potentially a member of this committee to sit on the Board of Directors of Niagara Peninsula Energy, Inc. for a 3-year term effective January 1st, 2020. Do I have a mover for this, please? Councillor Trombetta, seconder. Councillor Cody. The request is a nomination for somebody who would like to sit on the Niagara Peninsula West Power Board of Directors. Do we have anybody interested? Councillor Trombetta?
Thank you. Can I ask questions first, Mr. Chair? First, knowing that I already sit on Penn West, and I know, and the mayor also sits as well on Penn West, and yourself is sitting on NWIC. NWIC is the Niagara Wireless Internet Corporation. Sorry, my mistake. NPE. I have both out in my area, so that's why I get a little confused sometimes. So this seat is a 3rd?
No, it's to replace you. No, I'm only kidding.
It's-
I'm
is
not
it-
sure.
It's a second.
So
We
is
need
the mayor-
clarification from
it's,
the-
It's a second for Niagara Peninsula Energy, not Penn West?
It's Niagara Peninsula Energy.
Oh, it's a second for. Okay, no, I was just confused because Brian, it's just the wording was a little confusing for me, right? So I thought there was 3 for Penn West, now there's 2 for NPE, so. That's all, my questions are good, and, I.
Now I'm, There are two electrical ones. One is Peninsula West Power, Inc., and the other one is Niagara Peninsula Energy, Inc., NPEI. I sit on NPEI. At this point in time, through caucus last year, the mayor and Councilor Trombetta sit on Peninsula West Power, Inc. Now, in this particular case, I find it confusing to have a second representative because we only had two. You're supposed to have two from each of the municipalities since I sat on this for 2 terms. I'm confused by this request unless one of you two gentlemen have bowed out. That's the only thing I can.
But again,
It's confusing. I'm also.
sort of. She's just saying it's for NPE, not Penn West.
This says Peninsula West Power, Mr. Brian Walker has nothing to do with
Well,
it.
the clerk just stated that it's for, and so you're getting a second representative, not us.
NPE is.
But you can't under Mr. Brian Walker because he has nothing to do with NPEI.
Well,
Mr. Mayor?
I can provide a little bit of clarity. So NPEI is the parent organization. Penn
Correct.
West is our zone.
Correct.
Okay. So Mr. Walker, who represents our zone, is saying we get another, they're asking for another representative at the big corporation.
The
So
NPEI.
we've seen the map, right? We have NPEI overall, and then there's 4 zones, a small bit of Font Hill, us, and one in Niagara Falls, and right. And so what they're saying is, in order to balance at that level, they're asking for a second one. So basically, what it boils down to is they need somebody to back you up or check you, keep you in check. Yeah.
There-
Are you volunteering?
Anytime. What I'm confused about is, you're saying this is part of NPEI.
It is. It says there twice. I know who Brian Walker is, but this is the actual motion. Is where, if you look at it, twice it says Niagara Peninsula.
Mr. Chair, Madam CEO would like to speak to this.
It says Peninsula West Power Inc., doesn't say Niagara.
That's what I'm saying.
No, it does. It said Board of Directors of Niagara Peninsula Energy, but this whole thing is Peninsula West Power and Brian Walker.
To assist, please, if you could go to page 12 of your agenda, the actual request there might clarify it.
Now, if this is for the Niagara Peninsula Energy, NPEI, and I've attended the board meetings, both of governance, finance, and the regular board of directors meetings, there has been no discussion about this whatsoever. But it has not been in front of our board that we have said that there is an opening or a backup or whatever there is. This is totally out of the blue. Through Mr. Walker, apparently, which has never attended any of the meetings of NPEI that I have been at. This is very puzzling.
I can shed some light on that. At the last NPEI meeting that was at the Pin Oak Drive location of NPEI,
Yes.
this discussion did come up. Now, I didn't get to vote, but I was in attendance.
Okay, I was not.
You were not
I
there.
was sick that day.
Yes, you were.
And that's when it was brought up.
So you shouldn't close.
And so we did have just a brief conversation that Brian Walker would be writing this letter and asking. So that's why I know you were sick that day. I know exactly what
I missed
happened in
this
those 3
meeting
days.
here, I missed the next day at NPEI.
Yeah.
It was not a good week.
And yes, orientation.
I'll nominate Councilor Riley for this position if he's interested.
Councilor Riley,
I am interested.
you are interested. Is there anybody else in the committee here that wish to also put their name on it? No, at this time? All right, then that's fine. We've already got a mover and a seconder, and we've now put in William Riley. So I asked the question, all those in favor of William, oh, hold on a minute.
Am I allowed to vote on this? I should be able. Okay, just want to.
You think it'd make a difference? I think you're gonna make it.
No, I just thought I. That's all I have.
Okay, Mayor Billsman, do you have any credit? You had your hand up.
No, I was voting.
Oh, you're voting
And I
'cause
was
then-
pointing
then all
at
of a sudden we
those
got-
he had questions on.
Okay, are we done with any other questions at this time? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. Congratulations. Staff reports. Item A 63-19, amendment to budget. Treasurer Director of Finance, Donna D. Philippus. Budget Status Report, RFD-T-25-19, September Budget Status Report, Amendment to Budget, Recommendation, Amendment to Budget. Number 1, the report RFD-T-25-19 dated October 21st, 2019 regarding the September 2019 Budget Status Report. Amendment to budget be received for information. And that council approve a budget amendment to transfer up to $17,800 from the sidewalk reserve in order to finance the new sidewalk section between 353 Station Street and Van Woudenberg Way. I need a mover and a seconder for this, please. Councillor Gann and Councillor Cody. Any questions, members of committee? Seeing none, all those in favor? That's carried. Other business, item A 64-19, members of committee, verbal updates from members of boards and committees if required. Are there any from here? Seeing none. Moving on to members of council, other business items of informative nature. A 65-19. Are there any members of committee with regards to this wish to speak? Mr. Mayor.
This is, I don't know if it's National Library Week. So I just like to highlight that tomorrow I will be reading, if I can. I came down with a cold just yesterday. But I'm going to do my best to read to some children, along with MPP Sam Osterhoff at our library. And I would also like to highlight the, later on this week, we have the age-friendly, or that, I'm going to maybe let, I don't want to take any steam from Councillor Gann, because it's kind of her baby, but I want to make sure she addresses it. So I'll just highlight that, but I don't want to just say it's Library Week. What is it, national? Provincial Library Week. Oh, it's a whole month in the nation, but only a week in Ontario.
Any further on this? Councillor Gann, you want to speak with regards to this? Since you got alluded to it anyway.
Since I did. Just to point out that we are hosting in our new community center on Thursday of this week the Age Friendly Niagara Network. So it will be members of various councils, some staff members, and the chairs or co-presidents or co-chairs, whatever their titles are, of all the various seniors or age-friendly groups in Niagara, all coming to West Lincoln this week. So we expect somewhere between 50 and 55 people, and they will be there from 8:30 in the morning until just after lunch. So.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, you have something for
Yeah,
you?
just one more thing in two parts. One more thing in two parts. NPCA mapping, final public for the Chippewa/Welland River floodplain mapping is going to be at the Wellandport Community Center at 6 o'clock on Thursday, and at the Abingdon Hall next week, Tuesday, at 6 p.m. So it's just an informative. This is what the consultants have come back with, and it's basically going to close off a 9-year chapter in the mapping of the Welland River. Just like to get that on. Thank you.
Okay, any further? You has something?
Thank you for indulging me. I wanted to remind everybody about the times that we have for some community engagement for the strategic plan. There's next Tuesday night, which is October 29th, from 6:30 to 8:30. We'll have staff at the West Lincoln Community Center to do some specific outreach to the people that are visiting the facility, to ask them for some input into what they think is important for the community. And then on Saturday, November 2nd, from 9 until 11 a.m., we're going to be in the Wellandport Home Hardware and doing the same thing. And then in the afternoon, from 12 until 2, we're at the Caister Library. And so these are just, we're going to places where we get as much local traffic as we can get, and we'll be pointing people in the direction of opportunities to provide input through our website. And also there'll be handwritten cards that people can give us their information, and we will be compiling all that.
Thank you. Anything further from any member of the committee? Okay, there are no confidential matters tonight, so we are now adjourning at 7:40 p.m. We can take a few minute recess.